everyone, Cam Roberts here from Cobalt Corp. Now, you're watching this video because you're interested in what we do at Cobalt Corp. And more specifically, you're interested in maybe looking at one of the projects that we can introduce you to. So we have Amanda on the call, Greg on the call, and we also have Trent on the call. Now, Amanda and Greg are our specialists that speak to people that put their hand up and fill out the inquiry forms. So if that's you, you've probably already spoken to Amanda or Greg, or possibly will speak to Amanda or Greg in the near future. So we're going to kick off with Amanda. So Amanda, what are one or two questions that you get asked commonly around, specifically around projects? When people are interested in making money, they can see the opportunity. What are one or two questions that you'd like to start with that you can shoot over to Trent?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first questions that people ask me straight out of the gate is, what is the money that I'm investing being used for, and how is it protected?
Great question. So first and foremost, all funds, you basically are buying shares into an entity. That entity holds a mortgage over the property. So your funds are secured by way of a mortgage over the venture itself. What they're being used for depends where we're at in specific projects. A lot of the time it is to acquire the land and run the DA costs and all the bits and pieces around that. With the one that we're currently doing, it's running some DA costs and we'll run the construction costs as well. So it's very easy. All costs are attributed and accounted for accordingly and are on the financials associated with that, but more so the group or the entity, which is the group, on the financials have a mortgage for that specific amount, whatever it might be at the time.
Perfect. And then usually they follow up in the sort of, when is my money returned to me?
Another great question. So like anything, it's at the end of the project. So we have to go through the process of getting the project built, certified, and then obviously settled is the key one. So what we typically like to do is get the pre-sales requirement to cover off on the bank debt. And we typically will then refinance the client mortgage out behind the scenes. And that typically is obviously at the end of the project. And, you know, the project term, whatever it might be, if it's 12 months, 13 months, 14 months, 24 months, whatever it is, that's when you'll get your money back. Like I've said to both of you, and I'll say to everyone else, whatever we state, add 3 months just to be safe. Now, it can be 3 months either way, but we just like to give people the opportunity to know that, you know, if we say it's 12 months and it takes 15 months, then you're not disappointed. And it can do that very simply because, you know, one of the council departments, or it could be one of the government departments, it could be Energex or whoever else, may delay the certification process for no unknown reason. One of the projects, for example, we copped a 10-week delay from Energex, even though they put the infrastructure in 12 months prior to that registration date. So they're things that can happen that are outside everyone's control.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And, you know, that's all part of being a sophisticated investor or self-certified sophisticated investor, Trent, isn't it? They understand what this is and what they're getting into, and they just understand that there can be minor delays from time to time, or projects can go faster and finish earlier. It's just what it is.
Yeah, well, our current project that we're doing is 8 weeks ahead of schedule. But we're about to move into certification process, so that could be lost if we get a delay through a government entity. I don't think it will be, but I'm just assuming the worst case.
Yeah, excellent. All right, Greg, so over to you. What are one or two questions that you'd like to ask Trent that, you know, you're getting often on a regular basis from some of the people that you're talking to?
Just continuing on the theme of security and how secure is my money? How likely am I to get it back? Can you drill down onto the loan to value ratios so it gives people a little bit more comfort?
Yep. Great question again. Similarly to what Amanda just asked a second ago. So when a client comes in, sophisticated investor, they're buying shares into an entity. That entity, you as a group, then lends the money to the project and you have a mortgage security over the property. Now, granted, we do obviously get bank funding to do the construction side of things. So your mortgage will be a second mortgage up front. But what happens is once we get the pre-sales in play, that first mortgage gets extinguished, and then your first mortgage becomes, your second mortgage becomes a first mortgage, or we can refinance it out or go through the process of using the convertible note option. With respect to LVRs, common question that we get, we always work off what's known as a gross realization value, or a GRV, all right? And that all that is what's the property going to be worth at the end from a valuer, and they're always pretty conservative. For example, the one that we're doing at the minute, the valuation's just come back in at 43. But we know that we're probably going to sell out at, say, 48. That's where the current market sits with respect to square meter rates and all the bits and pieces. So, it is what it is. So that's what we work off. Now, we know that we're going to be borrowing generally about 50% LVR for the construction side, because traditionally we like to own the land outright and then just borrow for the construction side. And then depending on the group, but we max out at 65% LVR with the capital that goes in from our clients and sophisticated investors. So your funds are always protected by way of the mortgage. We like to stick those buffers in play with respect to, it's 65% of the valuation number, not the end result number that we're thinking it will be. And that gives people a lot of comfort, because there's always an extra buffer in there. And what I've just said 2 seconds ago with the valuation differences, there's over 10% variation there that we will more than likely see in the positive. Now, again, worst case scenario, if it went in the negative, you're still well protected from the perspective that you can, we know we've got enough fat in the deal to ensure that the first mortgage is extinguished and the client's debt is extinguished as well, purely and simply just based on theoretical numbers.
Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so Greg, does that answer your question? And then do you have another one for Trent?
Yeah, look, and another one that does come up from time to time is what happens if the builder goes broke?
It comes up quite regularly. Look, if a builder goes broke, and we're all seeing the news of, residential builders going bust left, right, and centre, there's a reason for that. The unions and everything else in between are making it a lot harder for builders to survive, plus approvals and everything else known to man. My brother-in-law is going through this at the moment on a property. He's a 16-story luxury apartment block he's doing on the Gold Coast, and they've had to replace the builder. It takes about 6 months, but it can take longer. But with warehouses, it's not that long, and the reason for that is it's only 4 concrete walls and a roof and a little bit of fit out. The big thing with what we do is our superintendent, who happens to be our engineer as well, signs off on every stage. So, for instance sake, once the civils are done, pipe work, plumbing, for instance sake, then slabs, then tilt slabs, roof, etc., all gets signed off by them. So worst case scenario, and it has happened in the past where a builder's gone under, we basically just replace them relatively quickly. There are some delays in getting that done because you've got to sign off some certain paperwork, and that's fine. But it typically is it's a bucket ton easier to do it on warehouses than it is to do it on a, high-end townhouse or luxury apartment building, because, it's just 4 walls and a roof, of concrete. It's not real hard to figure out what goes where with respect to replacing builders and ensuring plumbing's right and all that. That generally has already been signed off on.
Excellent. And so we'll just give Trent a little bit of a break to catch his breath and probably get a drink. But again, over to you, Amanda. I know you speak to a lot of people on a daily basis and have a few follow-up calls with people. And, they end up being in this sort of consideration stage where they need more information. They want to know more about it. They know it's right for them, but for whatever reason, they just need more information. So what's another 1 or 2 questions that comes up with you as they're in that consideration stage?
Yeah, so when they're in that consideration stage, they're really looking at the returns, and that's when the profits and the return questions sort of start coming into the conversation. So they want to know things like, is the rate of return fixed? If the project goes over time, how is it recalculated, and also how it's distributed back. So they're the sort of those follow-up questions that that really are on the minds of most people once they've had a chance to look at the project info.
Okay,
Sure.
Trent. So yeah, over to you. Fixed returns versus payout at the end, and what happens if a project goes over time? How do they get paid?
Yeah, so traditionally across most of our projects, you generally will see anywhere from 18 to 25% on worked out on a per annum basis. We currently have it out there at 18, but there's an opportunity to get into this particular venture that we've been talking about at 24%, which works out to 2% per month. Now, it is a profit share return. Whilst it is a fixed amount, it is a profit share return. So once we get to the end of the project, obviously those profit shares can be paid by way of, X amount of dollars. Now, with respect to timelines, so if it's forward or back, let's say it goes and extends 3 months, well, you get an extra 6% because it calculates on time. So, if we're saying 24% calculated on an annual basis, and it goes over 3 months, well, you're going to get an extra 2% per month times by 3, payable to the group. So it's pretty easy to calculate. We used to do it a different way. Having said that, it works out a lot easier to manage the way it's done now. It's still at the higher end, specifically with mortgage security. There's no real place I know of that you can get that sort of security or that sort of return with that sort of security. You're typically looking at, anywhere from 8 to 12, 15% max is what I've seen on a mortgage security type property return. And then you start moving to the higher risk stuff, which, typically is sort of 18% plus short-term finance type rates is traditionally the 18 to 24, 25% marker. But for me, it's a great avenue for people to, if they're interested in property, and let's be honest, most Australians are, particularly our sophisticated investors, it's a great way to, have an avenue to, you might run a business, or, you could be running a charity or whatever it might be. You get to focus on your business or whatever you do. You could be a professional, you could be a doctor, a surgeon, whatever. You can focus in on what you do. I can't do your job and you can't do mine, basically. So for me to go and be a surgeon, for instance sake, I've got to go and study for 15 years to even get remotely close to the skill set that someone of that ilk's got. So it's the same in the reverse. For someone to learn what we've done, it's taken us 25 years to get to the position that we're at right now. So what it enables people to do is a sort of a set and forget. So they could be a business owner, a surgeon, as I said before. They're focused in on their business and doing their job and making their sales and generating revenue over there. This is a good, just little off the side or off the cuff thing to have. Obviously, don't put all of your last cents in there. It'd be silly from a from a planning point of view to do that. But with a mortgage security at a rate of 2% a month or 24% per annum, calculated at the end, it's pretty hard to go past.
Now, two things I want to bring up there before I come back to Amanda is, first of all, Trent, just to answer the question of, if the project finishes early, they still get paid the same amount that they came in on, that they were estimated on, right? Circa. Yep. And number
Correct.
two, you were talking about the language you were using there was about, we have 25 experienced, when it comes to what we do, things like that. So we know, the people on the call here, myself, Amanda, Greg, we know who you're talking about in that capacity with your development group. But can you expand on that and maybe, talk about Matt and yourself and your history and your background about what gives you, that authority in this space?
Yeah, well, Matt and I have a very, so Matt Solomon is my development and project manager. He basically looks after all of our ventures with us end to end. So he's my right-hand man, if you want to call him that. Lovely chap, has a world full of experience. We have very similar backgrounds. And we've taken a long time to obviously find each other to get to this rate. And we've been working together for the last sort of, I think, 6 years. But we basically, both of us started by way of doing a free apprenticeship, if you want to call it. So we both nominated a couple of property developers that we wanted to learn from, and I know I did not get paid for about 2.5 years in the whole process. So I was doing it for free whilst doing another job, and learning as much as I could and getting involved. Now, Matt has a very similar story. He basically apprenticed someone for 2 years before he got into doing his stuff that he did in South Australia and other places. So we have a very similar background. We've both run pretty much everything similarly. So we've both done land subdivisions, townhouse developments, unit developments. We've both facilitated aged care stuff. And may look at that again in the future, not right now. But where we've come down to, and I've had a lot of experience in land and stuff like that, the reason we do warehouses predominantly is because it's relatively simple compared to the other stuff. And it for me, it's a really good way for you to get into something at a good price and get an exceptional rental yield off them. Typically, they sort of yield about 7% net, versus a residential property, you look on average, you'll get about 2.4% net, and those numbers are based around the country. So for us, again, we've got very similar background. I think I'm about 26 years in and he's about 24 years in. That's really the only difference. Is an absolute plethora of information. Is my complete opposite with respect to how we operate. But we operate really well both sides because we look at things in the positive and negative aspects and meet in the middle and figure out a plan to move forward.
Excellent. All right, Greg. So over to you. Have you got any more questions for Trent based on what you're seeing and hearing from people?
Yes. When it comes to the pre-purchase discounted option that people have. Is there on the plan, is there a specific unit that is earmarked for, rather than them just picking, oh, I want that one?
There is, however, they can pick as well. So, for example, what we typically do is we'll get rid of the smallest ones first because they typically get a higher rate of return. And we'll earmark those for the first ones to get rid of. And then we move up in size basically to the larger ones at the end. Having said that, that changes depending on where we're at in the specific, cycle of the venture itself. The clients have the option to choose. So, for instance, if we go in at the 100% offer, which is you get in at bargain basement price, which in the terms of the existing development is about 3,900 a square metre plus GST. And the retail rate we're looking at, according to the valuer at this present time, is about 4,800 a square metre plus GST, although we do believe it's more likely going to be 5,000 a square metre or more at this time, given what's selling around the area. So clients have the option, or members have the option to select which property they want. One person might want a 200 square metre warehouse. Another person might want it for his own business, so he might buy a 500 or a 600 square metre property. It just depends on the person. Obviously, there's an affordability gap as well. A 200 square metre warehouse is going to be cheaper than a 600 square metre warehouse. It's going to be 3 times the price for obvious reasons. So, and then the other question that comes up, and I don't know if you're going to ask this, Greg, but the other question comes up around mezzanines. What do you do with the mezzanines? A lot of the time we will infill them. The reason is you get a higher rate of return on the sale price, and they're better from a rental perspective. Having said that, again, we have had people ask us not to do that. They'll still pay the same rate if they're a retail client. We're talking about not a member. And we've had people ask us to put grease traps in, completely fit them out, and run all these fang-dangle things. So it just depends on the individual as to what they want. The good thing with warehouses is you legally can buy a warehouse I can buy one in my super fund and I can rent it back to myself from my business. And what we're seeing more and more of is people actually living in them as well. So. Excellent.
So, Greg, did that answer your question? And did you have any follow-up or different questions for Trent?
Just on that, if you do infill the mezzanine, is that at the same cost?
You pay for the price of the builder doing that.
Okay, yeah. So it's really a choice thing whether you want.
Well, it is, because a lot of them will see, it could be just an office space, but we've seen cool rooms go up in the top space. We've seen all sorts of stuff. So it just depends on what essentially is going in there, as to the cost of it. Because the way we fit them out is they'll be fitted out in full, but we glass them. Because it's a lot easier from that perspective. The heat rating and air conditioning in there's we find's better. And most people want to look over their warehouse as well as. So that's why we do it that way. But a lot of other requests are to put, segregated office space in there as well.
So if it's glassed in, that's standard, or it just comes standard without the glass, and it's a
No, at the moment standard is with the glass.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, this increases the square meter rate on the mezzanine.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just little things like this that add value to the end product as a development. We don't have to do that, but it's just something that we've found, through our cost analysis, cost and benefit analysis, that actually benefits the project in full. And it's silly for us not to, because you're sort of leaving money on the table, so to speak.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, Amanda, over to you. Do you have any final questions for Trent? Probably now's the time to fire them off.
Yeah, actually, I think that we covered off all of the top questions that are at the most people's top of mind when we're having those initial conversations. And I really do appreciate Trent's time to answer all of them.
Okay, great. Excellent. So, Greg, what about yourself? Any final questions for Trent?
Just a minor logistical question that's come up is if someone's keen on investing, but they would like to do it with their super fund, they haven't set up their self-managed super fund, is there time for this project, and how long can we wait for that?
The short answer is yes. It depends on how quickly it fills up from here. Having said that, it generally takes superannuation funds about 3 weeks to 4 weeks to set up in full. They're not as onerous as what they used to be. It used to take about 3 to 4 months. So as long as you've got the and if people need assistance on this, we can certainly recommend the accountants that we use. There's no referral fee or anything paid, but the reason we say that is they specialise in this stuff. They've got a financial services license on their end, and they specifically set these things up accordingly. So we do have and have had clients go and do that with them. And yeah, it doesn't take very long. And yes, you can secure your spot as long as you're honest and tell us up front. We can work around the timelines that that are set out, but it doesn't take too long.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Any final questions for Trent, Greg?
No, I think you've covered all the questions that I had ready to go.
Excellent.
Well, I'll just add in that, in the years that we've been working and doing this stuff, we've never lost a client's funds, ever. And it's something that we really hang our hats on. And that's all due to structure and ethics. So, if people are looking at it and going, oh, I'm not sure, et cetera, I just want them to know that the structure is set up the way it is after years and years and years of testing, and certainly a lot of backward and forwarding with legal advice to make sure it's secure. But it's really imperative that people understand that your funds are secure. You're getting an incredible rate of return for basically not doing anything, which is how all this works. And utilizing someone else's experience for your own gain. So it works quite well in that respect. Okay,
excellent. And in finishing, Trent, obviously Greg and Amanda will be talking to people, and if someone's watching this video, they get their decision made. They want to be part of this project or another project in the future if they're watching this as a recording. What are their next steps? What's that person's or potential shareholders' next steps to getting involved, and how soon should they transfer their funds across?
Yeah, typically what you do is you fill out an expression of interest form, the legal form that's sent out. You just tell us that you want to participate, and then the whole process starts from there. So the specific lawyers that are working with us, they'll reach out. You'll fill out their forms. You'll fill out all the details of either your person or your entity details. It could be a company, a trust, super fund, whatever. Just make sure you fill it all in. So you need ACNs, ABNs, address details, all the bits and pieces associated with it. Once that's done, you then will transfer some funds into their account. Now, they do charge to set all this up and get it all done. It's about $3,000 from memory in GST. That covers all legal costs, all accounting costs, your share costs, all the bits and pieces. So if you're transferring $300,000 in, you transfer $303,000 in. They give you a receipt of payment for the $3,000 as well as your $300,000. You sign some documentation after that. That gets sent to the accountant. The accountant registers it with ASIC, and then you get your share certificate straight after that. And once those funds are released to the project, that's the start date for the 2% a month.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you, Greg. And Trent, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, buddy.
We'll
Thanks,
chat
guys.
soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.